Innovation distinguishes a leader from a follower. But innovation is facing a challenging time. Will it bend to geopolitics? Can it continue as an inspiring and disruptive force? Will it still find a way to improve the world? Do join me on Let Innovation Speak, World Insight Special on Summer Davos 2019 only on CGTN. Welcome to the session, The Future of the Belt and Road Initiative. My name is Tian Wei. I'm a moderator and host coming from China Global Television Network. It's a great honor to be sitting together with our panelists and to illustrate the potential of a very significant project. You know, it's important these days that we'll be able to get ourselves out of the daily social media tweets and drama stories, to be able to look at the future and the potential of some of the most important issues, particularly about development that is taking place around the world. Therefore, my great honor to introduce our panelists. Nasrul Hamid, Minister of State for Power, Energy and Mineral Resources from Bangladesh. Sir, good to see you. Song Zhiping, Chairman of the Board with China National Building Material Group from the People's Republic of China. Good to see you. Olga Yarova, Under Secretary General, Executive Secretary from the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, based in Geneva. Good to see you. Last but certainly not least, Bruno Marques, who is the Senior Fellow with the Renmin University of China. He's, of course, originally coming from Europe. Thank you. Should we give them a round of applause, maybe, to encourage them to have some real insight to share eventually for this hour? Thank you so much. I want to start with you, Mr. Minister. Geopolitics these days has already topped the discussion topics for every panel. Probably we have to handle them as well. How is Bangladesh likely to handle that balance among so many important economic players investing in your country, including those investing on the Belt and Road Initiative?
Tell you frankly, somehow the BRI had instigated all the big brothers together to invest in Bangladesh properly.
Really?
Yes.
Tell us how.
Like, see, when BRI came over with a big package of investment plans in the power, mostly it's the power energy sectors, not even if you keep aside of the power and energy, they invested in the railways, big roads like that. We found out that Japan came up with big investment plans, more than $6 billion. India came up with a credit line of $3.5 billion. Even we recently found out the Americans has opened up their commercial office in Bangladesh. So it's quite a good harmonic picture, what I see, and it's very beneficial for Bangladesh also. And we got about more than $5.5 billion from China as an investment and also in debt, actually.
So that makes your work fascinating, isn't it? You need to come and talk, doing shuttling diplomacy in a way among all the players.
Yeah, the political picture in Bangladesh is friendship with everyone. So we don't quarrel with anybody. Our country is open for investment for everyone. We have a very good package for the investments, like 10 years tax holidays, anybody interested to invest in the infrastructures, power, any place, any industry, new industries. Our government, Sheikh Hasina, has setting up 108 economic zones for different countries. As there are countries who already been booked these economic zones, like Japan has already booked up an economic zone. China already came up with economic zones. India already shown interest to invest in economic zones. So what we think actually, somehow BRI has somehow helped our country in other way to bring all the big investors, to attract investors in Bangladesh in other ways.
Good to know the panoramic view, shall I say, that you have outlined for us about investment from foreign investors into your country. Mr. Song先生, 听到部长先生
Mr. Minister Hamid just talk about the effect of BRI in terms of attracting investments to the developing countries. Bangladesh is a clear example of that. So will you anticipate more competition in countries like Bangladesh in terms of investments? BRI is not an initiative for Chinese businesses or Chinese companies alone. It is an initiative of collaboration and a collective investment scheme for all international players. For our company, we are also cooperating with third parties in markets such as Africa to cooperate with Schneider from Germany and also from France, companies like Siemens, and also from Japan, Mitsubishi. So for the implementation of BRI, it comprises both competition and cooperation.
Maybe competition is the main theme, but cooperation is only the decoration on the side. 有人会说，哎，您是不是外交？
Indeed, some people may say that you're being diplomatic and competition is at the core. Do you agree? We have a global procurement policy. We are open to cooperation with a lot of multinational companies from different markets. In the cement plants, for example, we have 50% of indigenous equipment. The other half is procured from our global partners. And for projects they have won the bid, they also buy from us. So what I want to point out is that BRI follows the basic logic of business, which is cooperation. You cannot develop by yourself. With cooperation, you will develop faster and also have better cost-benefit performance.
When Mr. Song was talking, quite a number of names coming from European companies pop up. That's exactly your area, which is to promote development of Europe and also interaction with the rest of the world. Tell us about what you're focusing on, especially when you have a neighbor sitting on your left side who's been talking about Eurasia over the decades. Madam Under-Secretary General, please.
If we speak about competition versus cooperation, I would add another word, and this is opportunity. And I consider Belt and Road as opportunity for everyone, under one condition, that we need to behave responsibly. It means we should keep in our minds economic sustainability, financial sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability. And if you speak about connection of Europe with Belt and Road or Eurasia, let me explain, because people tend to mix it. So I am leading the United Nations, one of the 5 regional commissions of the United Nations. We have 5. We have a regional commission for Africa, Latin America, and so on. So if I tell I'm for Europe, it is indeed 56 member states. And it means the EU is exactly 50% because there are 28 still with the UK. Then we have the whole Balkans, the former Soviet Union, including Central Asia. But our member state is, for instance, the United States, Canada, Israel, Turkey, and Switzerland. So this is like European continent plus. And from these 56 member states, 30 of them are on the Belt and Road. So, and this is why I'm here and why it's our concern that we work together and that we are really behaving responsibly. And today I would like specifically speaking about environmental sustainability.
We'll let you to talk about that a bit later when everybody really also need to handle that issue. Mr. Makesh, to you, the Eurasian idea, it has been there for quite some time. Why and how much really do you think the momentum of the Belt and Road will be able to make it a bigger possibility?
I work for a conservative think tank in the United States and for a rather hawkish think tank in Beijing. I don't think there are many people that can do that.
Okay, that's fair.
But that's exactly what I've been trying to do, to look at the question from both sides. And you always have to look at the question from both sides. The thing about the Belt and Road, I'm more and more convinced as I get to know it better, the ambition of connecting Europe and Asia and everything that is in between, of course, India, Southeast Asia, is really what is at the heart of the Belt and Road. It is a new kind of globalization because it is a globalization that incorporates difference and incorporates competition, because Europe and China have very different ways of doing things. And China, I think, is already being forced to look at the world, change in reaction to the way things are done in other countries and other regions, adapt, as Mr. Song was saying, this process of adaptation. And I think that's the richness of the Belt and Road, that it is forcing China to change, to adapt, to learn from other regions of the world. So I wouldn't necessarily think that competition is a bad thing. I mean, the globalization we had from 1989 to 2008, perhaps it sounded better to our ears if you come from the West, because it was a globalization on Western terms, under Western rules. But that was not sustainable. Now we have a globalization that is much more divided, much more fractured, where different regions have to come together without abandoning their beliefs. And that's the challenge, I think, for the next 20 years.
Okay, so everybody has already set the stage, right? Let's handle some real issues. Mr. Minister, debt trap. People have been talking about that for quite some time since Belt and Road Initiative came into being. To you, a developing country, one of the really economies in Asia on the way up, and yet still with some of the least developed economy bases, how do you see that? Are you going to owe money to everybody now, to Japan, United States, China, and maybe some of the other players too?
See, a lot of changes. Bangladesh has become second largest exporter country in garments in the world. We produce freshwater fish, fourth largest in the world. Bangladesh is the seventh largest producing fresh vegetables in the world.
So your point
we are
is
self-sufficient in food. 160 million people is one-fourth of the size of Texas state. 700 rivers, 60% wetlands. Still you see about 4 million women are working in Bangladesh, in garment sector itself. So, being such a scenario, actually it moves Bangladesh in a different way. Now we have a reserve of more than $35 billion of foreign exchange in our country. It was less than 1 billion in 2009. And it's go on actually. It's now, the GDP is about 7.6. We are targeting that we have to go more than 8 within the next couple of years. So that's not the problem about the debt trap. But what I understand, there are news in the media, but there are initiatives that are taken from BRI to a lot of countries. I saw in the news there are a couple of countries which actually considered to be debt traps. But there can be a, you know that, there can be a bad news and good news are there. So somehow there are a lot of good projects are there also with that initiatives. And somehow the BRI should somehow take care of the medias to bring the good initiatives in front. I see in very positive pictures initiative of the BRI.
Mr. Song, would you like to respond to what Mr. Minister had been saying, the quality of investment and the way of doing investment and working with the local people, the local culture? How have you and your company been trying to tackle those issues?
We have 3 principles in making investment. First of all, we fully support the local economic construction, and that is our major principle. So as we've just mentioned, the plans for local development, for local environmental protections, and we should know about all those issues for our investment. And secondly, during the investment process, we are cooperating with the local companies, local enterprises, because we need to also offer benefits to them. And thirdly, we are working for the benefit of local people. For example, as for our company, we have also established some schools and donate to some hospitals, also build some community services to the local people in the BRI countries. And we hope to improve the livelihood of local people so that people will welcome the China company to make the investment. And also, as for the debt traps you've just mentioned, and actually we have already gone through 6 years for the Belt and Road Initiative. For now, we have been working on some infrastructure constructions and some power plant constructions, those basic things, because they are the fundamentals in BRI. And we know those countries would also follow what China has gone through, the urbanization and industrialization. And the foundation of them will be infrastructure. So frankly speaking, for the infrastructure construction in those countries, they will need the bank loans from China.
来投入，但是后边呢，比如说现在，其实“一带一路”的国家呢，他们可能重点呢。
But to follow the countries with BRI initiative, they are shifting to urbanization, and this is a process that will attract more and more foreign currency reserves. That for the earlier stage infrastructure construction could be paid back with its local economic development. And this is exactly what China did, because in the beginning of the opening up and the reform of China, we also got financing from Japan for the major infrastructure construction, and we have already paid back the loans. So this is the process, and we don't need to put the financing in this process as a debt trap, and this is just not the case. And as for us, for our company, previous years we have engaged in many factory constructions. And for example, we had 360 cement factories in those countries, and because cement is a necessary part for those infrastructure construction, and that is why we hugely invested in this part. And for now, what we have been doing is that like a building material supermarket, and some processing factories and so on. So this is more like towards the industrial part and some project to serve the society.
Not every country that Belt and Road Initiative has been working on is like a country like Bangladesh, which is on the way up. There might be problems for some of the countries to come up with enough US dollar, for example, for their payment. If they are doing a project with China or with others on the Belt and Road Initiative. So to Chinese companies, how do you handle this issue?
这个问题呢，是目前呢我们也遇到的问题。
This is also the situation that we have already encountered, because for some of the countries, they don't have enough foreign reserves, and they will have some problems for the payment. So we're trying to work on it. For example, we will increase the loan volume so that they will have enough room for it. And secondly, we will help them to improve their industrial development so that they can get more foreign reserves to themselves. And another thing is about using RMB as for a settlement. So all in all, I think this is only one of the problems in the Belt and Road Initiative. But this should not be the barrier that's stopping us to go forward. We need to find solutions for specific problems and then to carry on.
Let me go to you, Madam Under-Secretary General. You've been talking about environmental issues, extremely important. Even from China's perspective, it seems, as the largest emerging economy, the country has been going through quite some challenges about environmental protection. So from your perspective, Madam Under-Secretary, how those issues be addressed on time and properly?
Don't understand me wrongly. I don't want to restrict myself just on environmental issues, because what we are working on...
Green Belt and Road.
Yeah, for instance. But UNEC's typical standards, norms, regulations, guidelines, setting body since 72 years. If we speak about infrastructure, we speak about connectivity. For instance, we identified 9 European Asian transport links, 9 in rail, 9 in road transport, and we work on removing the non-physical barriers. We, for instance, also develop standards for public-private partnerships, maybe partially respond to your question how to get the money, you know, because without the private sector, Agenda 2030 and 17 SDGs wouldn't be possible. I was 2 months ago in Beijing on 2nd Belt and Road Forum, and Mr. President of China expressed his commitment to greening the Belt and Road, what we are very happy to hear. And we are really offering, in environmental area, we have 5 environmental conventions and 8 additional protocols to them. And one of them, just to give a good example, is so-called ESPO Convention. It is on transboundary effects of any infrastructural projects that can influence our neighbors. You know, so we have 32 parties to the convention in our region. And it means if any infrastructural project is built on close to the border of the neighbor, the parties are supposed, they should consult, they should inform each other. And specifically, there is a protocol on strategic environmental assessment that goes even further in the earlier phase of the project, still when the ministries are preparing their sectoral programs on construction. They need to inform and consult with the neighbors, because we know environment has no borders. And this is free to any member states to access to this protocol on strategic environmental assessment, also to China. So speaking about Belt and Road, it would be very, very useful if we really assess strategically our projects, our infrastructural projects, how they can influence the neighboring states, and how they need to work together just for the benefit of people living in all countries that are on the Belt and Road. This is our...
I have to come back to Mr. Minister before I go to you, sir, a bit later. Mr. Minister, are those consultations being done? Are you aware of the standards, for example, Undersecretary General have been proposing, or other standards, because there are many other different ways and systems of looking at things? Are you, as countries being invested in, also being proactive in talking to your partners about what is the best way to make it a green Belt and Road initiative, and also about others' cooperation with Japan, with the United States?
Different countries are already, mostly the European countries have shown interest in the wind, but we don't have much of wind there, but still we have a lot of sun. So they are keen to invest in the solars and other renewable energies. And we kept about more than 10% that will generate power from the renewable energy, and we're doing that.
Okay. Innovation distinguishes a leader from a follower. But innovation is facing a challenging time. Will it bend to geopolitics? Can it continue as an inspiring and disruptive force? Will it still find a way to improve the world? Do join me on Let Innovation Speak, World Insight Special on Summer Davos 2019 only on CGTN. Specific issues are always important, but visionary issues are also very important these days, especially when we're experiencing dramatic changes these days, as they say, in our world. Therefore, Sir Mukesh, what about that Eurasian vision that you've been putting into your books and you've been telling your friends about the Belt and Road Initiative potential. How much really is there? Or is it too far away a picture for us?
Well, let me ask the audience, what do you think is the main axis of global trade today? Do you think it's transatlantic between the United States and Europe, trans-Pacific, or Eurasian between Europe and Asia? And the answer, predictably, is that it is the Eurasian axis. Many years, it's 3 times the volume of transatlantic trade. So we still need to adapt our language and our thinking to the economic, material reality.
Well, wait. You cannot answer for our audience. So maybe we should have a survey right here. What is the first option? What is the second option? Let's just have the ladies and gentlemen sitting over here have a vote here. What is the first option you say?
Well, but the answer, this doesn't depend on what people think. There's the figures, but
it's important that what people think here. It's a democracy in the room. So let's have a vote here. So what is the first option, if you can?
What do you think is the most important axis or relation in the world economy? Transatlantic between Europe and the United States, trans-Pacific between the United States and Asia, or Eurasian between Europe and Asia?
Okay, so 3 options. Transatlantic, trans-Pacific, Eurasian, okay? First up, you cannot raise your hand 3 times, okay? Or can they?
Well, they can, because, there are different ways to answer the question.
Let's do that. You can raise your hand many times, as much as possible. So let's do this. Transatlantic, anybody? What? Only one? Transatlantic?
Because they trust me when I said it.
Okay, all right. And then let's go trans-Pacific. Trans-Pacific. Wow, I think about half, almost, right? Yeah. Okay, and now Eurasian.
It's not bad.
Also about half as well. What's going on with transatlantic?
Well, I think the main reason why Eurasian and Trans-Pacific is a bit less than Eurasian, but more than transatlantic, I think the main reason is that the complementarity across Eurasia is enormous. You have regions that produce natural commodities, you have regions that are developing, you have regions that are fully developed, like Europe and parts of China. And so all these economies fit very well together. Whereas the United States and Europe, that we talk about all the time, is the main economic relationship in the world. In fact, there's very little complementarity. We've specialized in roughly the same things, and we're becoming competitors more and more. We'll see whether there won't be a new wave of tariffs, this time not against China, but against Europe and German automakers, which I predict will happen pretty soon. So clearly, the future of the world economy is in these Eurasian relations that are developing. And I was very interested to hear Minister Hamid speak about how it's not only the Belt and Road, it's Japan, it's the relations with India. So there's a whole world that is developing with new relations becoming increasingly more central than the old ones that we're used to.
And given the fact now, half of the EU member economies, have already been working on certain forms on the Belt and Road Initiative. What does that mean, in a way? Because a lot of people here might not know. Some have been working on third-party development. For example, the Netherlands, Switzerland, even England, the United Kingdom, if they remain in the European Union. And there are others who also sign on different formats of cooperation along the Belt and Road Initiative. So what does that mean, Mr. Makash?
I think it's very important. It's a new phase in the Belt and Road. Until now, the first 5 years, we used to think of the Belt and Road as being focused on developing countries. And I think the moment Italy joined, a G7 country and a NATO member, it changes the nature of the Belt and Road. And then I think Switzerland, let me mention Switzerland since it's the forum's home country. The Switzerland memorandum was very important for a number of reasons. First of all, transparency. The memorandum was published the night it was signed. And China didn't have objections. Switzerland pushed for it, and China didn't have objections. So other countries should do the same, just publish the memorandum quickly. And then the idea that China and Switzerland will work in third countries is also very important. So that's a different model. This is not about Chinese investment in Switzerland. Switzerland has enough capital, probably too much capital. And it's about partnering together and investing in third countries. So we're seeing this topic of the panel. Is the future of the Belt and Road is starting, and in some respects what happened with Italy and Switzerland shows the future.
Not European countries alone, but also maybe Japan and some of the other developed economies, also about third-party cooperation, third-party market development as well. Mr. Song, maybe I need to let you to come into the conversation about that too, because some are still thinking about Belt and Road, still at the very initial stage of Belt and Road. But now, as the other guests have clearly outlined, this is already moving to the next stage. We need to really catch up with really what's going on the ground. What do you make of this stage of development with the vision that Mr. Makesh outlined? Of course, you don't have to agree with him. That's his personal academic vision. What do you make of this current stage of development when it comes to Belt and Road? Please, sir.
Firstly, BRI has been undergoing 6 years, and in the initial stage we started with infrastructure. But if you go and visit, I now quite often visit the BRI countries, and the development has been very quick, very rapid. Some industrial parks enjoying very large size.
Mr. Minister also mentioned about that in his country.
And also, if you visit supermarkets in Europe, you find lots of apparel also from Bangladesh. So their processing industry has been developing very quickly. Urban development has been developing very quickly. So I think BRI, besides the infrastructure investment, we should continue. For Chinese companies, they should also look into the next stage. In media, I think there are some misunderstandings about the Chinese companies. For Chinese companies, when it comes to environment, Chinese government attaches importance, and Chinese companies attach importance to the environment. And if you visit BRI countries, firstly we give an overall emphasis on environment in developing the Sino-Belarus industrial park in Belarus. Xi Jinping gave personal instructions that every single tree should be protected. Therefore, in the BRI countries, whether it's construction or industrial parks, we attach great importance to environmental protection and safety, quality, technology, costs. But environment is given the first priority. And in the BRI countries, their environment is very important to the future of mankind. Chinese companies know this very well. Therefore, for our next steps, we will emphasize the environment. And also, you mentioned, it was mentioned that BRI countries, not only developing countries, but also medium-income countries, Italy, you mentioned, Bulgaria, and Argentina, Brazil, and these countries' involvement or participation, they need infrastructure, they need to develop their economies, and we also pay close attention to their needs. So regarding the core of BRI, there are 2 things. One is we are improving the standards of BRI projects. Secondly, the scale is rising up and scaling up. More and more countries are accepting BRI.
Madam Under Secretary General, I also want you to come in further on the topic. What Mr. Makesh said is not just the concrete specific points, but rather when these points are linked up, what it could mean. Now, that could be very important. When we are working on the daily issues, we should really also look further. To you, what does it mean? When those dots are connected together, whether it's geography or way of doing things, what could that mean?
Well, if we speak specifically on environment, we need to speak about climate change. And climate change, unfortunately, is progressing faster than humanity is able to act. If we connect the dots on daily environmental activities, Minister from Bangladesh mentioned renewable sources of energy, water. But again, each project has transboundary effects. We don't have boundaries, We have, for instance, our Air Convention. It's about decreasing the limits on harmful emissions of harmful substances. And by this convention, implementing it in our region, the scientists proved that we were able to prolong life expectancy in European continent by 1 year, by 12 months. So we all need to act together. Speaking on climate change, a few days ago was preparatory meeting in Abu Dhabi on the climate summit that Secretary General Antonio Guterres is organizing end of September in New York. So, and we have the tools, we have standards, norms, guidelines, I mentioned protocol and strategic environmental assessment. So let us strategically assess what we are doing, because it's very complicated protocol, and if the country wants to implement it, and it's exactly speaking about bigger areas, transboundary effects. So let us connect the dots and think about the future generations if we speak about the greening, the Belt and Road.
Mr. Minister, about the bigger vision, also to you. We see so many different kinds of a regional cooperation. Belt and Road could be termed as regional, could also be termed as transnational. So what do you think, when you connect the dots together, what kind of bigger vision that you are having in mind when you see the latest development and the latest stage?
You see, the BRI for the future, the young people will carry on. So somehow we must have some plan to develop our young people.
Yeah.
So technology transfer can be one way to develop these young peoples. Like China, not only putting up projects there for infrastructure, also they can come up with transferring the technology. They can open up R&Ds. Like Huawei can open up their R&D in Bangladesh. They can come up, encouraging the youngs. They can, what I see, like we have huge projects. We have more than hundreds of thousands now. Chinese workers are working there in Bangladesh recently. And other countries, workers are also there. We have projects from Russia, like nuclear power plant. They're building up a nuclear power plant. We have got thousands of Russians are working there. So what I see that there is quite a cultural gap is going on. So I wanted to see a cultural globalizations in the country itself. Like, why not actually? Why not hundreds of thousands Bangladeshi can speak Chinese? Why not hundreds of thousands Chinese people can speak Bangladeshi? It should be there. So I see globalizations through BRI. I wanted to see in the future. It's not like one project you just finance and come back. And it will not, the initiative what the China government has taken for the long term, it will not work if you don't connect with everything actually together.
And I'm afraid it's not just the government, because a lot of Chinese private enterprises, Mr. Song, if I understand right, are also investing and working on the Belt and Road Initiative, sometimes even in competition with you. Yeah.
Talking about the private companies from China, yes, actually SOEs and the private companies in BRI, we are whole. We form the same value chain, and for us, we usually engage in big projects, and they engage in small projects. So we are supplementary. So we are just like one core, and we are linked together. And there is no clear boundary between us. And when we go to a particular country, we even eat the same meal together. There's no clear division between private company or SOEs. It's just people's imagination. And Mr. Minister mentioned that in BRI countries, and nowadays we are supporting these countries in technology transfer. Many Chinese technologies are needed by these BRI countries, just like once happened between China and the Western countries. And now we are doing the same technology transfer to the BRI countries. Also, we are training their staff members, their workers, and among our companies, we invite them over to train them in our Chinese companies. So we have done a lot of this, and also we train workers locally in these respective countries. And also some BR countries, they don't have very good standards or laboratories, and therefore we are setting up joint laboratories, 10 joint laboratories to set up their national standards and so on. And therefore in BRI, we want to enhance their technology standards and managerial standards of these countries. Only by this way we can usher in prosperity for BRI.
People have questions about Belt and Road as a result of this geopolitics change, which is happening after the Belt and Road Initiative was brought up. So what do you make of that, and what does that say about the bigger picture you've been emphasizing?
There isn't any fixed answer. You may have different opinions. I don't think we are, and I think the results from the meeting at the G20 show that. We are in a very competitive time, but it's competition with integration. I don't see any attempt to decouple, really. What I see is an attempt to control the value chains, to occupy the highest position in the value chains. But that's a game that will go on for a long time, and it's a game that all the major players will have to play. But it is not war, and it's not Cold War. We continue to see integrated value chains, but I think different actors are no longer naive. They know that within the value chain there are positions that are more dominant than others. If you control the crucial technology in the value chain, then you can organize the value chain. And we see the United States and China, in particular on the case of 5G, trying to occupy the dominant places within the value chain. This is the world as I see it, but of course we're still at the early stages. It's been 1 year of this new world of trade wars or trade disputes. I think even in China, the first 6 months, we were supposed to talk about trade disputes, and now it is a trade war. So we're all adapting to a very new world.
Interesting. We'll see how people see all of these issues being portrayed and outlined, framed in an ever-changing landscape. Shall we, the audience, give the round of applause for our panelists. Thank you for their contribution and insight. And thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your interest. Thank you. Really appreciate it.